What are your dogs like when guests come to the home? Do they jump all over them or do they cower in fear? Well, today we're going to talk about how you can help your dog to enjoy having visitors and be polite to them. And we're joined by dog trainer Jeff Millman. Um, Welcome to the Positive Post in Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host Kristi Benson. Hey, Kristi, do your dogs like it when you have visitors?
Well, Soleil sure does. She thinks that visitors are pretty much there for her enjoyment.
Pepper loves having visitors too. He's very, very sweet with them, which is really nice. So today we've got Jeff Millman with us to talk about this. Jeff Millman was always known as an animal fanatic since he was a little boy. After studying journalism, living in Alaska after college while living in a tent, and working professionally as an internet consultant and creative director, he studied dog training with the world famous Gene Donaldson at the Academy for Dog Trainers in San Francisco in 2002, which is amazing. Since then, he's been honing his dog training craft while training thousands of dogs. He's the author of three books, including the two-volume Triggers and Reactions, A Guide to Fixing Dog Behavior Problems, which I've got a copy of the second one in that series here with me. And he lives in Carey, NC, with his two wonderful children, amazing wife, and English Shepherds, Sky and Storm. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
joining us.
much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're really pleased to have you here, and it's always nice to talk to a fellow graduate of the Academy for Dog
Yes,
Trainers. And
absolutely.
Christy and I are going to ask you a bit about that towards the end of the interview, I think. But today we're talking about how to get your dogs to greet visitors nicely. And I think sometimes people are quite embarrassed if their dog jumps on visitors, but actually, in a way, it's a nice problem to have because the dog is being friendly in that
Right.
case, even though they're perhaps a bit over enthusiastic. So, what do you tell your clients about that?
Yeah. So any type of reactivity, the volumes that I came up with, triggers and reactions, whether the reaction is jumping, barking, or biting, everything's handled the same. And the trigger is the person coming in the house. And depending on what you're looking for, the goal typically is calm behaviors. So whatever the final behavior is, whether it's jumping, barking, or biting, if you work on two options, either desensitization, actually three, desensitization, management, or obedience, you can solve any type of reaction. That the way I phrase it with my clients is, if you look at your dog and say, gosh, I sure don't like that behavior, you can change it. And the behavior that you might not like might simply be the dog is uncomfortable or nervous. It doesn't have to be an obedience problem where the dog is friendly jumping. It might just be the dog is a little nervous. I sure don't like when my dogs are nervous. So if you don't like what your dog is currently doing, you can desensitize, manage, or use obedience. Those are the three options that I recommend.
So for dogs who are like the enthusiastic jumper uppers, and Soleil,
Yeah.
she doesn't jump up that much.
Mhm.
Like I have one pair of pants that she really likes to engage with in a romantic way, which I find really funny, but my wife does not.
Yeah.
For dogs who are jumping up, there's a few different behaviors. You know, if you're going to let's train a new behavior route, there's a few different
Mhm.
behaviors that are sort of useful.
Yeah.
What's your favorite and why?
Yeah, I mean, the two that I talk about in the book that are kind of logical and make, are very helpful are recall. Your dog is jumping on somebody, you can call them, or go to your bed. Both of those options, I always recommend to be proactive rather than reactive, because the way I phrase it is I'd much rather have my dog not jump on the next 10 people that come in and then have me have to say, hey, don't do that, than plan ahead, and as soon as they see somebody, ask them to go to their bed or call them away. So I call that proactive obedience versus reactive obedience. And it just over time works better because then you're not having the rehearsal of the behavior, which is person coming in, dog jumping, person coming in, dog jumping. So that's kind of how I work with those situations.
So, do you teach people to do a lot of training on that in advance? Because sometimes it can take quite a bit of practice, can't it? And dogs can be quite excited.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of what I bring to the table is evaluating a dog's response. So If a dog simply can't respond to obedience, then it's not just magically going to work. You can't just say come, 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 or go to your bed multiple times, and which is never recommended. So what I focus on is the proactive strategy always first, like whether someone's coming in the house or you're going to a restaurant or a brewery and you want to see if your dog can listen to you. I'm a huge clicker fan, and what I recommend to my clients, it's so much easier simply to click behind your dog. So your dog's in front of you, the guest is further away. If you click and the dog doesn't respond, then at that moment the dog is over threshold. And if you saw your dog jump the last time somebody came over, they're probably going to do that at that moment. So then that's when I would switch to management, which is grabbing the leash gently. Hopefully they're trailing a leash if you're not sure how they're going to respond, gently moving them away and then working further away to accomplish one of those goals.
Mm. And of course, sometimes the issue is that the dog actually is fearful and they're afraid
Yeah,
of the visitor to the home. And I think sometimes people can find it quite hard to recognize that because they expect all dogs to be friendly to all people,
right.
if only they were, but they're not. And so, what do you tell your clients to look out for that might be actual signs of fear or anxiety when someone is there?
Yeah, and there's a whole laundry list of things to look for. The first thing to look for is freezing or stiff behaviors. Quick movements is another version of stiffness, but just if there's somebody comes in and a dog moves quickly, I call it little rabbit steps if they move quickly, or they just jerk their head towards a stimulus or a trigger. That's a sign. What I always recommend is look for nonchalant, casual movements. And what I recommend for my clients is to notice when it's just the family, you're watching a movie, what does their dog naturally do if somebody stands up or goes into the kitchen? But then if someone rings the bell, notice the difference. And the differences is what I recommend that everyone starts to learn, because the casual, normal movements is what a dog is doing when they're comfortable. It's the quick, jerky, surprise movements that is what you want to look for. So jerky movements, stiffness, a tail going down is a red flag. Wide eyes, of course, whale eye is what it's called. Those types of stiff, quick, jerky movements are the main thing that I recommend to start with. And there's a lot of other details, but if you start by looking at that, you can really learn a lot about your dog.
So earlier in the discussion, you were talking about how sometimes you like using management.
Mm-hmm.
So for this particular context, what are your favorite kinds of management? What do you recommend to your clients when they're going to have visitors coming over? You did mention the dog having a leash on at the door, which I think is really useful.
Yeah, and that's just such an obvious, simple thing that a lot of people just frankly don't think about. And it's really the easiest thing. So that's number one. Baby gates, having your dog in the backyard if you have a backyard, having them in another room. If that causes other problems where a dog is anxious in the bedroom upstairs, if the visitors are around, then I always recommend that you work on that separately to avoid your dog having an association. As soon as I hear strange noises and people talking downstairs, when that happens, I'm upstairs and now I don't like being alone. Work on that when it's just the family. So then your dog learns to be comfortable in the home, in another room when there's nobody present. Then when somebody appears, one thing that I do recommend is one family member is with the dog in the room, clicking and treating or just giving treats when they hear noises downstairs, the visitor arriving, etc. So it's not just all or nothing. It's not you're in the other room, you're managed, but we can desensitize you to the movements and the noises that you hear when somebody appears. So it's always trying to manage for safety, but then if you see another problem, work on that. I like to say behind the scenes before guests arrive. So then when guests arrive, it's not this double whammy of I'm alone, plus I hear these strange noises.
I like how you're centering the dog there and desensitization, you just mentioned. Desensitization and counter conditioning are really useful when we're teaching dogs not to be afraid of other people or of the noises that you said they might hear downstairs, for example. But I find sometimes people actually find it quite hard to get get their head around this idea.
Yeah.
So what do you tell to clients to help them understand this process and how it works?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, desensitization is introducing a trigger at an intensity where there's no undesired reaction. The way I like to phrase it is, nobody hires me to come over when their dog looks at somebody. Great, that's not a problem. It's the looking plus jumping, barking, or biting. So if there's an undesired behavior at that moment, your dog is not getting desensitized. You want a neutral or happy response. So as long as your dog is able to experience person coming in or a noise and remain neutral or happy, you are desensitizing. So one thing I recommend is if your dog reacts to noises, it could be a fire truck, it could be a doorbell, record or use YouTube noises repeatedly throughout the day at a level where the way that I evaluate is if a dog is able to calmly take treats, then they're getting desensitized. If there's any type of hesitation or more obvious reaction, they're over threshold and having a bad experience or a questionable experience, which could lead to sensitization, which is more sensitive and more reactive.
Mm.
So just because we know how tricky desensitization and counter conditioning is as a technique, what sort of things do you try and stress to your clients? What kind of tips do you give them to help them wrap their minds around the technique?
Yeah. So basically, the way I answer that question is whether a dog is near a person for 5 seconds or 5 minutes or an hour. The way I like to think about it is that's an interaction and that's an experience. So every experience, whether it's 5 seconds or an hour, builds up to the relationship of a pleasant experience. So what I just recommend is, I always say, don't put an artificial deadline, don't put a time frame. Your dog doesn't have to be with the party for the entire, hour, 2 hours, whatever. Every time your dog looks at a guest or hears a noise and is able to turn around towards you, whether you do a command, leave it, go to your bed, whatever, or just simply respond to the click and receive the treat, they are having a good experience, and that is building the relationship. So to avoid overwhelming my clients, I don't give them homework where it says, your dog has to love the next guest that comes over. All I tell them to make it easier is simply create a good experience. And then if you want to do more work, literally one step closer, or if the guest is sitting down, have them stand up and then reevaluate the dog's response. If they're able to maintain their comfort, you are properly desensitizing and you're working towards a good relationship. So just very small, methodical steps to reach that long-term relationship is what I recommend.
Breaking things down into small steps is really important, isn't it? It makes
Yeah.
such a big difference. And I think kind of the theory behind this is actually really quite complex. So it has to be small bite-sized chunks for people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there are definitely times, I've been doing this a long time, where I will go into more of the science and I'll see my client's eyes glaze over. I'm like, wait, I need to make sure you're understanding. So, what I will do is say, can you pretend your friend is on the couch right now? Can you explain to him or her what I just said? And then that helps me understand if they really got it. Because to me, this stuff, when I say easy, it's not fast or simple. And I've been doing this a while. So for me, it's logical. I see dogs do things that I'll even point out and say, did you see that? And my client will say, what? So there's things that I notice just because I've been doing this a while. So it's my job not to just talk and expect them to do it, but to make sure they can actually do it. So sometimes I have to reel it back and say, okay, let's just start with, I walk by every time, and this is how I always start, by the way, but your dog looks at me, just simply click. What happened? And then we'll talk. What happened? My dog turned towards me and took the treat. Did they take it rougher than normal? That's a sign of stress. Oh, actually they did. Okay, I'm too close. Let's redo it when I'm 5 feet further away. Let's do it again. What happened? Turned around, took the treat gently. So it's just a lot of just frequent evaluation to make sure that everything's going smoothly rather than pushing the dog over threshold even a little bit if possible. So the dog has a beginning, middle, and end of a good relationship. and there's lots and lots of times over the years, I enjoyed this one that's happened where I'll pet. My goal is not to pet every dog. Some dogs I literally never pet because they're too aggressive. But in those situations, lots of times my clients are thrilled because now they can have someone in the house without their dog attacking somebody, which is a win. But maybe I'm not going to pet that dog. But a lot of times over the years, my clients will just say, at least I have a plan. Like, my friend doesn't have to pet my dog, but at least I can have somebody come over and we can have coffee. And maybe I'm standing over here holding the leash while my friend is sitting on the couch, but at least they're in the house. So it's just trying to find those starting points and then give them a formula for just continuing the process.
And that makes such a big difference. And that thing of the dog no longer taking treats so gently actually is something that Jean really emphasized to me when I was at the academy
Yeah.
and struggling with one of the assignments that we had to do. And that was one of the clues I had to look for in my dog. If this was Bodger that I did it with, that was one of the clues I had to look for, and that really helped. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times you have to ask the right question because there's been many times over the years where someone says, "Oh, my dog never takes treats roughly. They always have a gentle mouth." And then I'll say, "Do you actually give treats when you're outside when your dog sees dogs?" "Oh, no, I don't do that." So like if you're not gathering information, you're not gathering all the possible information you can. So that's a big recommendation for my clients is your job is to gather information and analyze it to make sure you're taking the proper steps to keep your dog comfortable.
And I also like the emphasis there on giving your dog treats in a wide range of circumstances as well. And that's giving dogs treats when on walks is one of the things that we, especially Kristi, often talk about on this show anyway. So yeah, it's something that makes a big difference. Now,
Yeah.
you've actually been a dog trainer for quite a long time now, and I
Yeah.
feel like a lot has changed over the years. So
Hmm.
how do you think things have changed, both amongst trainers and amongst the general public in terms of how we see dog training?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's still the old school, choke chains and stuff like that, which I never agree with. I mean, my most serious aggression case was a client hired me because she was bit in her face and had 47 stitches and plastic surgery. I didn't show up and say, no, we use the shock collar. It's just never appropriate, never recommended. And there's lots of science behind that. But as far as changes, I really think people are being a little bit more vocal as far as being comfortable saying that. I think it used to be kind of the old school mentality of like, well, I don't want to alienate potential clients that might hire me. There are clients that contact me and say, just so you know, I know you don't like choke chains, but I'm going to use one. And it happened a couple of weeks ago. I said, sorry, if that's really what you want to do, I'm literally not the right trainer for you because I'm not going to show up and feel comfortable with that. And I'm literally not going to use that. So there are, situations where my client at that moment has a prong collar or something like that. And she, he or she says, I want to change. I will work with that client and help them get into a harness or a collar. I'm not like, just not going to talk to that person. But if someone is just absolutely adamant about that, I literally won't, I'm just saying, thank you, but I'm just not the guy. There's lots of other trainers who will do that. I don't agree with it. If you ever want to, hire me someday and I'll explain and show you other ways, I'm more than happy to talk to you in the future. So I think people are feeling more confident is what I'm seeing, like, you know, kind of drawing that line in the sand. And even on social media, I think people are being a little bit more vocal is kind of one big change. What about you? Is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, and I mean, part of what you're saying is not just about not being the right dog trainer for someone who still wants to use a shock collar, but it's also the case that I think amongst the general public, there are lots of people who do not want to take that route and they do want
Mm,
to find a reward-based trainer.
yep.
And sometimes they struggle to find one, but that means
Yeah.
that for those of us who are reward-based trainers, there are more than enough clients to go
Right.
around. I think the public's view has changed quite a lot on this, and there is a lot more awareness of training methods and the fact that we should be using treats to train dogs, basically,
Yeah.
which is a very good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's definitely a big change I've seen for sure.
Mm.
And I think we're seeing a lot of sort of like vocal a lot of sort of expressions of anger from the trainers who use aversives right now, I think in the last few years. And I'm hoping it's like an extinction burst, because it does seem like there's
That's what I
quite
was
a bit
gonna
of sort
say.
of like scrabbling,
Yeah.
angry, and not just, talking about their own techniques, but really coming after in an unpleasant and unprofessional way, coming after rewards-based trainers. So
Yeah.
yeah, here's
And one
hoping.
thing I do appreciate is if that's all you've learned, you worked with somebody, that's what you learned. It's not like you can magically just switch and learn new techniques and become comfortable with them. So, I feel for a lot of those trainers that they're kind of panicking a little bit because maybe they even realize this isn't the right way, or I wish I knew a better way. But it's not just the information we have. I like to say it's not rocket science, but it's science, and you either know it or you don't. And if they don't know how to use treats properly, treating, not bribing, by the way, then they just might feel panic and just unsure. So but there's lots of information, and they can learn those methods. So, they can change if they want to.
So we were interested to hear that you graduated from the Bricks and Mortar Academy, as
Yeah.
us online grads call it.
Yeah.
So both Zazie and I are online grads. So we always like hearing stories about what it was like when it was in person in San Francisco. And I was hopeful to go to it when it was the in person, but I couldn't make it work within my life. And then finally I was like, I'm ready. And at that point, it was right around the time it stopped, and Jean was coming to have an online version. So, give us some stories. What was your experience like?
and I actually would like to hear some of the other ones too, because I don't know a lot about the online. If anyone could pull it off, Jean can, but the in-person, it was just such an amazing experience. I have a journalism degree from a pretty good university, and the academy was very challenging. One thing that's just unbelievably wonderful is we had access to Jean, and she gave presentations pretty much every day, 5 to 6 hours a day of in classroom Jean time, which was incredible. Janet also was there as well, and she's amazing too. But we had 5 to 6 hours of classroom time, and then we had projects where you would, I'm sure it was within the SBCA. So we would have homework assignments or ongoing projects. Go work with a separation anxiety dog, go work with an aggressive dog, work with a dog who's pulling on the leash, work with a puppy. And you would have these projects that you would have to do to complete, and you do write-ups about them. We also taught classes to the public, which was pretty interesting. We would do case studies with Jean and Janice and work on as if they were the clients, and we had to work with them and pretend they were clients. And then we did everything from, there's some tricks that we would teach your dogs, but they would sit there and grade us in person. And I was kind of the nerd of the group. A lot of the other students would be going to the Golden Gate Bridge or doing different things. And I'm like, no, I don't want to miss anything. I have to go study. I took flashcards, and I studied I was probably putting in 12 to 16 hours a day, just trying to stay above water. It was a lot of work. And then there was a 6 hour final exam. That was really intense, but just the whole experience was incredible. I mean, there's just literally nothing that I would change about it. I mean, it was magical. And I can't say enough good things about it. I wish everyone could do the in-person as well, because it was really, really phenomenal. So it was great.
There's still the 6 hour final exam.
Yes.
But the thought of like coming in as sort of a newbie trainer and having to treat Jean like a client would be relatively terrifying, I think.
Yes, that's scary.
Yeah. She was always very, very nice, but it was definitely a little intimidating.
For sure.
But I just really appreciated every moment. I mean, going through it, I was well aware of like, wow, that's Jean right there. What we're getting right now is really valuable and interesting and everything. So yeah, I feel incredibly fortunate to have got that. What about the online, kind of how did the projects and everything work for you? How did that work?
Well, I think she did an amazing job of turning it into an online course, but of
Yeah.
course you get longer to do it, which I
Hmm.
think helps you fit it around other things that you're doing in your life, but it is still challenging. And
Mm.
that 6 hour exam at the end is definitely challenging. Jean holds
Yeah,
everyone to a very
I
high standard.
know.
And then
Yeah.
there are along the way, there's a few exams and assignments and video assignments where you have to
Mm.
send in video of your dog training skills, doing different kinds of things.
Right.
And some of those actually are very tough too, but they have wonderful staff who help to coach you through doing those. So that helps a lot. And I feel very lucky to be a graduate
Yeah.
of the academy. I think I learned so much from it. And I went into it as a psychologist with a lot of
Mm.
background knowledge already, and it really, really improved my skills.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel very grateful for that.
And just the reading list that she requires, it's a lot. I mean, it's really an intense program. So I'm glad to hear, I'm not surprised, but I'm glad to hear you enjoyed the online version too. I'm sure it's amazing.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah. And quite a good focus on fear and aggression, which has been very helpful for me, and I know it's very helpful for others too. So
yeah.
yeah. So thank you for coming to talk to
Oh,
us
you're so
today.
welcome. Thank you for
And
having me. This was a blast.
towards the end of our interviews, we always like to ask our guests to recommend a book that they have read recently and loved.
Yeah.
So what have you been reading?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I didn't finish this. I didn't have time, and I'll explain why, but have you read any Pinker stuff? Steven Pinker?
Yes. I haven't
So
read that.
this one is when everyone knows that everyone knows, when everyone knows that everyone knows. And it's kind of about, if you know something, it impacts your behavior, thinking about what the other person might know. It's super interesting. And the reason I wanted to read it is just, I'm always interested in thinking about from a dog's perspective, what do they know at this moment? And that's, like when someone uses the term stubborn, and I'll say, well, maybe your dog just doesn't know it. Like you're projecting what you think the dog knows at this point, and then he or she is making a conscious decision and trying to just be a brat. And it's like, well, maybe it's a little more complicated than that. Maybe your dog doesn't know it, or maybe your dog's distracted. So just that's what got me interested in this. And it's a heavy read. I mean, I'm going to finish it at some point, but in between reading about, maybe 30 pages of this, I happen to read a 800-page Ken Follett book just because it's much easier. But I love Ken Follett, and this is called Never, and it's about avoiding World War III. So it's not the most heartwarming topic, but it's really well written and really interesting. But this, can I give you a quick anecdote about an example of this book? There's a courtroom, and there's a defense attorney talking about his client and saying, in 1 minute, the person that is supposedly my client killed is going to come through that door of the courtroom. And then, so they wait a minute, and person does not show up. And the lawyer says, well, everyone in the jury looked through the door. So they're, and the lawyer at that moment was analyzing what the jury was doing, which they thought that person might actually appear. So then the lawyer said, so you think the person might be alive. So that's a reasonable doubt that my client did not kill the person because you think he might still be alive. And then the foreman got up and said, we have tallied the votes and the defendant is guilty. The lawyer said, well, wait a minute. You all looked at the door, so you obviously think the person might be alive. So that doesn't make sense. And the foreman said, yeah, we all looked, but the defendant did not. So he did not look towards the door because he knew the person was dead, et cetera. So it's just kind of that's an example of what's in the book, which is just kind of like person's behavior changes based on what they think other people know. So that's just kind of an interesting anecdote. And I'm going to finish it. I've read most of it, but in between, like I said, I read the 800-page easier book to read. And I love Pinker. It's just like not the easiest information. It's not light reading, that's for sure, but it's super interesting. So
Neither of them sounds like reading, to be honest,
yeah,
but I love it when
yeah,
people bring two books to tell us about. So thank you.
yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
very
You're very
much
welcome.
for
Yeah, well,
that.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was really nice to meet both of you. And your books are
Yes, you
amazing too,
too.
by the way.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
I haven't read your
Thank
second
you.
one. I read Bark, and it was fantastic. And I'm going to read the other one as well.
Oh, thank you
But
very much. And I'm
yeah.
just going to hold your book up to the camera again.
Oh,
Triggers and
cool.
Reactions,
Oh, cool.
a guide to fixing dog behavior problems. This is part two that I'm
And
holding up here.
I have this one,
Ah,
which is part one. That's my
yeah.
first one. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
yeah.
And so if people want to know more about you or get
Yeah.
your books, where do they go?
Yeah. My website is jeffmillman.com. And then there's a lot of information on there. And then the books are available on Amazon. So there's Kindle and paperback versions for both, for all three actually. So cool.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I want to give a special shout out today to our viewers and listeners in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you very much for joining us. Wherever you're watching or listening from, if you've enjoyed this, please tell a friend about it so that they can enjoy it too. And thank you for being with us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.